Hello, and welcome back to the Growing Together podcast. Did you want to say something?
I was going to say welcome, everyone.
I have to be careful I don't overtalk on you. So today we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what exactly an enlightened relationship is. I mean, our whole podcast is themed around conscious partnership, but I think a lot of people don't still understand exactly what an enlightened relationship is. So, I mean, because this is one of our first episodes, we thought it would be really cool to just enlighten you a little bit on what enlightened relationships are versus your typical traditional type of relationship.
Nice. Yeah, I think so too. I think a lot of traditional relationships stem from your upbringing. All traditional folk tales, whatever you want to call it, the woman has to stay at home and cook and clean. The man has to go out from 9 to 5, bring home the bacon. And I suppose most of us are taught that growing up. And
yeah,
it's almost been ingrained in people to know that this is the way forward, and it truly isn't.
Yeah, definitely. So I think especially when it comes to traditional relationships, like Joshie said, it does kind of stem from what you're exposed to as a kid, like what you see your mom and your dad, if you're lucky enough to have parents that were together, or whatever you experience seeing couples growing up, kind of becomes the mode that you operate from when you start to get involved in a relationship. And it's quite interesting. Obviously, we're busy doing a course in relationship workshop facilitators. And it's quite interesting to learn the evolution of partnerships. I mean, think about it. Back in the day, it was basically people came together. We're talking caveman days. Yeah. People came together basically for survival of the species. There was no romance involved. I mean, you think about those jokes where they just say the guy would like hit the lady over the head with a baton and drag her into the cave. I'm hoping it wasn't that violent, but that basically was the only purpose of like people coming together, was for survival and procreation. So obviously through time, there has been a lot of change, a lot of evolution. And I think in this day and age where we are exposed to so much information, so much wisdom, so much everything that we can really just learn so much, it's so important to start to learn more and incorporate more enlightened relationship characteristics into your partnership. And again, if you're not in a partnership, what we're going to talk about today is also something you can do on an individual basis, because at the end of the day, a successful partnership comes from two individuals who have done the work to find themselves, to better themselves, and then together do the same thing.
Yeah, that's right, 100%.
So we're just going to dive into the differences, let's call them that, between typical relationships and enlightened relationships. So the first thing we have here, typical relationships have a shared living environment. But on the other spectrum, enlightened relationships have shared interests and time together, which is quite interesting, because if you think about a lot of couples, I mean, I know a lot of couples that live together, but they do nothing else together. They share the home, they share those responsibilities. And when it comes to the weekend or their free time, they're off out and about doing their own interests and not really.
And there's nothing wrong with doing your own interests. I mean, it's good to have your own space. I mean, for a guy to go out with his mates for a drink and to go train on your own, it's good to have that. So there's ebbs and flows when it comes to your own space and your own time, but it doesn't have to be only with the boys or only with your mates. You can enjoy the whatever you're doing together.
Yeah, definitely. I think the whole point is that there needs to be a balance. I mean, obviously you need your own time, but if you're in a relationship where you have no shared interest or time together outside of when you're together at home, it's kind of not going to become an enlightened relationship. No, you have nothing to do with each other besides sharing space. So that was an interesting, what do you want to call it? Comparison of the two. Then the next comparison Typical relationship, they have shared responsibility, thinking like paying bills, looking after the kids, whatever it may be. Where in an enlightened relationship, there is mutual support for growth. This is such an important one. I think a lot of couples miss the mark on this one, where they're not really encouraging and keeping each other accountable to their own personal growth and their growth as a couple, right?
Yeah. I mean, shared responsibility can mean many things, though. What responsibilities are you sharing? Is it finances? Is it chores at the house? Is it picking up kids? Do you have like a set schedule that you have to do something, or is it, do you communicate differently? It's quite interesting to know that like a shared responsibility doesn't have to be a responsibility like, okay, I will pay for the food, you pay for the rent. It doesn't have to be that way. Does it make any sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's definitely shared, you have to have shared responsibilities as a couple. We're just saying as an enlightened couple, there's more than that.
Yeah. No, sure. That's
so this is like the basics of the typical relationship is obviously your typical relationship.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
It's what comes with part and parcel with being in a partnership. But to be in an enlightened relationship, there's so much more over and above that.
Correct.
And I think that's the point we're trying to make here. Yeah. Okay. The next point is that typical relationship, you are in a friendship, whereas an enlightened relationship, you have emotional intimacy. So this is quite an interesting development that we've had. I mean, we've always been emotionally intimate, but I don't think to the level that we are right now.
No, wouldn't, yeah.
And I don't know if we've mentioned this before, the Layla Martin neo-tantric date night thing we did. Looped hubby into a date night, telling him we're gonna have some wild, crazy sex night, and there was none of that.
Nope.
It was the most vulnerable, emotionally intimate moment I think we've ever had.
Yeah.
And we actually need to schedule another one, babe. But emotional intimacy is when you guys are literally sharing everything with each other. You are being vulnerable with each other. You are sharing your weaknesses, your strengths, your ups, your downs. And with that, obviously, also comes no judgment.
Correct.
Like, how are you supposed to feel comfortable sharing your most deepest, darkest parts of yourself if your partner has no time for that, or if
you yourself are too ashamed to open up to your partner? How will your partner ever know what your real struggles are? Otherwise, you keep them suppressed within yourself. The partner never knows what's really going on with you. And if it does come out, it comes out in horrible ways.
Definitely.
So if you can find the courage to actually sit with your partner, look at them in the face and say, listen, this is what I'm scared of. This is what I'm afraid of. You might find that they understand you a lot better. And those next times that these things come up, you won't have to like pretend like it doesn't exist. You could have the support that you actually need.
Definitely. And I think you'll see as we go through the points how the enlightened relationship just lends and tends to a more longer, fulfilling, beautiful relationship. Because with a typical relationship, like we said, that comes part and parcel with living with someone, with being with someone. But to take it to the next level is where you start to build that kind of intimacy, that bonding, that companionship that is unbreakable.
Correct. That's right.
What's the next point, babe?
Okay, so on the typical relationship side, we've got physical intimacy, and with an enlightened relationship, we've got true companionship. So I suppose in a typical relationship, it's almost like, okay, well, now I've got a girlfriend, fiance, husband, wife, whatever, and he or she, they need to put out now. It's part and parcel of the relationship. So I think it is an important part of a relationship completely. But at the end of the day, that isn't really, you can go and be physical with anyone. It is what it is. It's just, you can call it casual sex or whatever you want to call it. It's physical intimacy. You're getting intimate with a random stranger. With your partner, if you've been together for a while, I'm not saying that falls away, but I mean, after that's done, what do you do? So if you can find someone that's a true companion, not only will you have a better physical connection in terms of intimacy, but you'll have, I mean, there's only so many hours in a day. I mean, what are you going to be doing? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So physical intimacy, obviously, that is like, you need that in a relationship for it to last. But when it comes to true companionship, that is just being able to like lie in each other's arms, or know that you'll hold space for me if I'm going through something tough, or knowing that you will support me if something goes wrong at work. It's like that, knowing that person will be there for you no matter what the circumstance is, what the problem is, what the situation is. And that will obviously also last to a much longer, fulfilling, intimate relationship, definitely. Okay. So those are the characteristics that you can use to differentiate between a typical relationship and an enlightened relationship. Then we want to move on to the points of how these types of relationships improve their relationships. So as a typical relationship, generally you will use communication strategies to improve your relationship, whereas in an enlightened relationship, you will create a shared life vision. So on the one spectrum, you literally just communicate and make sure you communicate about important things, but there's no actual vision creation between the two of you. And we spoke a bit about this in our last bonus episode with the goal setting as a couple. And if you missed that one, you can go have a listen, because it's such an incredible exercise to do with your partner. But think about how much more, and I'm going to say fulfilling probably a million times today, but how much more fulfilling your relationship is when you communicate shared goals, when you create shared goals, when you guys both have something to work towards together, where you can celebrate together, where you can support each other together. It just becomes a more, I'm not going to say fulfilling.
But if you look at like communication strategies as a saying, that reminds me of like something we do at work. You know, guys, you're not communicating properly. This is a strategy in place so that you call me on this time so that I know where you are. So if you want to put that into a relationship, like, sure, communication is important. If you're not communicating, then you're gonna get nowhere. But if you're making it into like a business type of structure, I don't feel that goes well with a relationship, because then you almost feel pressure. Okay, communicates, call me at this time, make sure that this is done at this time. And if it's not communicated, then you're in shit. You're not going to see your friends on the weekend. Yeah. I mean, that to me doesn't sound like something I would want to get involved in, because I mean, I have enough pressures and stuff at work. Now you must come home and have the same kind of structure with your wife, partner, whatever, or husband. So like you said, if you can create life, if you can create vision, goals, and a shared life vision, well, then you're not only just communicating on daily levels, you're communicating about what you really want.
Yeah. And I feel like you'll always have something to talk about, because you'll have so many shared visions and so much communication about that you always have topics to talk about. Like the latter in the typical relationships, it almost feels like if you have communication strategies set in place, it's almost like do this or.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a consequence. Like I know with exes, I would always just ask them to let me know, because they would go on a boys' night. I was like, cool, you do your thing. I'll be home at 2. I'm like, perfect. But if you stay out later, just message me so that if I wake up, I know you're okay. Like, then that becomes almost like an ultimatum, or like, you know, like a forced situation where, I mean, in a enlightened relationship, I don't think that even becomes an issue. No. Like you go out, I don't, like, obviously I'll check in to see that you're alive, and you won't see it as me like checking up on you in terms of being naughty. It's just checking up on you to make sure you're still alive.
And that also creates honesty, because if you're scared, like if you do something and you get lambasted for being 10 minutes late after your curfew from your partner, you're not going to learn from that. All you're going to do is find ways to hide it from your partner. So now you're going to become more dishonest. You're going to start lying, more deceiving. You're like, oh, this crazy bitch. Oh, sorry. won't let me do what I want. But guess what? I'm gonna go behind her back, and I'm not going to be honest. 100%. So that communication is massive in anything in life. But you gotta weigh it up. You can't have your work strategies brought home.
Yes. Yeah, there's no place for work at home unless you work together. Okay, and I think that kind of lends so beautifully into the next one. In a typical relationship, You tend to improve your relationship with compromise, whereas in an enlightened relationships, you tend to improve your relationship with increasing quality time together. So it's quite interesting because they kind of seem like polar opposites. Like a compromise is like, okay, you can go play golf on Sunday, but then you have to fetch the kids for the rest of the week. Whereas increasing quality time together, you're not really having to compromise because you want to spend that time together. You want to create memories. You want to bond more. You want to communicate about things. You want to experience things together. I
mean, there's always going to be some form of compromise if you think about it. So if I want to go watch the rugby on Saturday, I'm like, listen, come with, we're all watching it there. I know it's not what you really want to do, okay? But you know it makes me happy. And I know having you there makes me happy. So that, in a way, you will kind of compromise, but it's not a compromise like, oh, I'm doing it because I want to get something from Josh.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also in saying that, when you start to have a more enlightened relationship, it doesn't feel like compromise. Like if you have a friends thing and I don't really know them, I'm still going to come with you because I love meeting the people that you are friends with. Like I want to be part of your life in every aspect. And the fact that you want me to be there is incredible. That's so why not take advantage of that? Okay, next topic. So a typical relationship will improve their relationship with remembering commonalities, where enlightened relationships help each other reach their potential. That is such a good one. Such a good one. Yeah, I think there's such an old age thing where, like, obviously they say opposites attract, but then they say you have to make sure you have certain things in common, otherwise your relationship won't last. Yes, of course, you need to have like common values and like the way you think relationships should go. I mean, you can't have a monogamist and a polygamist together. That is not going to turn out very well. But when you get to the point of helping each other reach their potential, that you don't need commonalities for that. You just need to like ferociously support your partner in whatever they do. Obviously, not in like robbing a bank. We're talking about the stuff that's going to improve your partner's life and future and whatever it may be. But in helping each other reach their potential, it just becomes so much more enlightened, because instead of having these like basic commonalities, like we both like fish, so we have a cool restaurant we can go to on date night, like we both like furiously support each other in everything we want to accomplish. We have full belief that you can accomplish that. And if you have days where you feel like you can't, you'll remind your partner that they can do anything they set their mind to.
Because a lot of time we don't know our own potential. Well, we do know, but we almost sabotage that because we lack self-belief, we lack confidence. But your partner can see the potential in you that you can't sometimes see in yourself. And when you're feeling down and you're feeling like, I'm not good enough for this, or this is not going to work, your partner can see that you're just going through a bit of a phase, and they can always pick you back up. But yeah, that's very, very important.
I was going to say something now, but the dog's distracted me. Okay, the next point. Typical relationships improve relationships with accepting differences, whereas in an enlightened relationship, you improve the depth of your connection. So, like we said, everything that falls under a typical relationship, you have to have essences of. I mean, you can't escape these things.
That's true.
But in up-leveling your relationship, you need to grow a little bit more than that, like level up a bit. So obviously accepting differences is a huge part of any relationship, because no one's ever going to be exactly what you want them to be. And if you spend your life trying to change that person, then you probably shouldn't have married them in the first place or started dating them in the first place, because the only person who can change someone is themselves once they've made the decision that they want to change that. So you'll be fighting a losing battle. So accepting differences is a huge part of being in a relationship. But improving the depth of your connection takes it to the next level. So, I mean, we have so many differences.
Polar opposites.
And maybe a few years ago, after a few drinks, like that could be like reason for conflict.
Yeah, definitely.
But after all the work we've done and stuff, it's actually such a beautiful time to sit and talk about each other's differences, because it improves the depth of our connection. I understand you on a deeper level. It gives us interesting stuff to talk about because I'm constantly learning the world from your perspective, and vice versa. And that just creates such a beautiful connection, because instead of having our differences create conflict, it creates more excitement, more knowledge, more growth.
Exactly.
Next
one. Okay, so typical relationship, becoming aware of triggers and patterns. Okay, and with an enlightened relationship, learn each other's love language. Yeah, because triggers, like I'm only starting to understand triggers now after the work you've been doing. And I didn't realize I have many triggers I have, like from your chewing to not just saying you, but in general, like you have these triggers. You don't know why you get triggered by someone making you upset.
Yeah.
And when you can be aware of these triggers and patterns, it doesn't mean that they go away. Yeah. You still get triggered by it, but like now you understand why you're getting triggered by your partner or what have you.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't even necessarily have to be your partner.
No, it could be
like
anything.
Things.
It could be anything.
Like burning the toast can be a trigger for anger.
It could be anything, like leaving your socks on the floor. So luckily, like you're really understanding with my untidiness.
You're getting so much better, babe.
Yeah, I'm getting better. And like, I just still don't understand how you can chew oats and sounds like oats.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, with a typical relationship, like a lot of people aren't even aware of their triggers and patterns. So like to be able to be aware of triggers and patterns in the first place is like your first step towards being an enlightened relationship, I think, because a lot of people just spend their lives going through blindly, not realizing what's making them react, like what the root cause of that and toxic patterns that they find themselves in, because maybe their ex-girlfriend cheated on them and now they're like really jealous about their new lady who's given him no reason to be jealous. So that is a very important part of starting to form this now enlightened relationship. But learning each other's love language is also so key, because you start to learn how to talk to your partner without triggering them or getting them spiraling into a pattern. And you just learn so much about your partner and how to, I guess this goes back to communication, how to communicate with them about certain topics that could, in a typical relationship, cause conflict. But in an enlightened relationship, just cause topic for discussion and for improvement and for, again, gaining a new perspective.
So I think that the learning each other's love language comes from a place of love. You're not trying to catch someone out for triggering them or reacting to that trigger, because if you're going to react to the trigger, you're going to get a reaction back, and it's just going to cause more conflict. So if you're learning each other's love language, you're learning ways to, sorry, do you mind if you just don't chew while you sit next to me? Without being like, what are you doing? So it is.
I obviously have a really bad chewing problem. Yeah, but I feel you. I think there's a way to communicate that can really, what's the word? Avoid conflict. I know, and it's been such a journey for me as well, especially think about it in the beginning of a relationship, before you live together, like there might be one or two things that annoy you about your partner. Maybe they don't like answer your call when you phone them and they take forever to phone back, or they come to your house and they leave the seat up, whatever it may be. It can be the smallest thing or the biggest thing. But then when you move in together, that's where like the biggest triggers and patterns start to become apparent, because now you are in a communal space where you're starting to notice your partner's habits in their living environment. And if you want to then take this relationship further, you need to be able to deal with those parts of your partner. So, I mean, I'm not going to lie, when we moved in together, your untidiness triggered me a lot, and I didn't know how to communicate it properly. And I think that caused a lot of conflict with us, because you would see it as me attacking you and not thinking you're good enough and react, and then I would react, and there was just no Nothing came of it. You didn't get any tidier. I didn't get any less angry about it. But when I learned, and when we learned to communicate better, and like maybe just show you how to do this the way that I like doing it, so that you know when you do that, you can either do it the way you used to do it and cause conflict. Not that I'm saying you have to, but I mean, in a relationship, you do want to better yourself and like accommodate your partner. It just creates a much more non-reactive.
But also what happens is something like, for an example, for say being more tidy. By nature, I wasn't, because I was probably lazy, and always my mom would do it for me. And as time's gone on, I've learned that the tidier I am personally, the less clutter I have in my own brain, in my own head, the better I feel whatever else I'm doing. So you have never actually told me to clean up. I've just learned myself rather be a bit neater, and obviously that's indirectly making you happier. So but like I said, that all goes back to you working on yourself.
100%. That's what
you're not going to ever tell me, hey, go clean that, because I'm just going to be like, oh, easy, pay me and I'll do it. I'm not your server. But it hasn't happened that way. You've never said to me, you rubber, you've left this on the floor, you pig, you that. I could see it was irritating you, but like, I'm getting better, but you had nothing to do with it, to be honest. It was all myself wanting to be a neater, more structured person within my daily life with work and so forth. And that's just, it goes back to working yourself. And I was not forced or pressured from you to make myself a neater person. Yeah,
no, definitely. I think, and we spoke about this in an earlier podcast, how in order to have an enlightened relationship, you both need to be actively working on yourself constantly. I mean, there is no end destination of self-improvement. You can only continue to get better and learn more about yourself and learn more about the world and learn more about your partner and learn more about whatever it may be, and start to implement that into your life to become a better person. And it was interesting that you brought that up, because it's true. Like, the more you work on yourself, and I don't want to say like the more you start to adult, because that sounds so boring, but the more responsible you become, the more you realize how, like, you can't leave dishes in the sink for a week, because then you get irritated because there's a whole bunch of bugs and worms or whatever it may be. Like, you don't want to live in an environment like that. And you just naturally start to learn, okay, well, if I don't want this outcome, then I have to take this action.
But of course, I go back to the typical relationship of compromise. Now I'm going to clean because I'm told to. Let me just do it to keep her happy or keep him happy, which is back to the traditional relationships. So you see how it doesn't really align with an enlightened relationship where you're actually working yourself to become more tidy. You're not doing it for your partner, you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. Like, it's your communication that you have with your partner, because sometimes it doesn't matter how many times you hint at something, they're not going to pick that hint up. So it's just communicating with your partner, and then of course working on yourself, because I think those two things together will create such a beautiful relationship, because you guys are communicating everything. He knows what she wants, she knows what he wants, she knows what he expects, he knows what she expects, and not in a compromise or a have to way. It's just like, I love you, so I want to be the best version of me for you, and you love me. That's exactly. And I love myself, so I want to be the best version of myself for me.
Take pride in yourself. Like, when you leave a bathroom, clean it, like, leave it better than when you found it. And I've been implementing that for about a year now. I just go there, and like, it's a habit now. I don't even need a little drop anywhere. But I don't do that. No one's going to come in after me like, oh, that guy left the bathroom so clean, what a cool guy. No, it's because I want to leave that place better than when I found it.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important. And I mean, this wasn't really in the points, but to have shared values and shared morals, because you're only going to be happy long-term with someone if you both have similar values and morals. Yeah. Like, if cleanliness or like respect, let's take respect. If respecting property or respecting people or respecting whatever it is one of my values, and you have no respect for anything, that is just going to constantly cause conflict for eternity. So I think it's super important. And I mean, it's not like a first date question, but it's something that can come up in the dating processes, to really speak about what your morals and your values are, because that can definitely become a huge issue down the line in any relationship if there's no commonalities there. Yeah. So, I mean, if you go back through the typical relationship, the shared living environment, shared responsibility, friendship, physical intimacy, having communication strategies, having compromise, remembering commonalities, accepting differences, becoming aware of triggers and patterns, it's based all on need, like a dependencies or an enmeshment of your lives, but nothing really more than that. There's nothing like beyond the need of each other, whatever that need may be. And I mean, it was also interesting learning that, like, obviously everyone talks about the honeymoon period and that in love stage. And obviously it's natural when you meet someone, your body releases all these exciting chemicals. But that was like how we were designed back in the Stone Age, when we needed to be attracted to someone, and then we would have sex with them, have a baby, and then 6 months to 3 years later, those chemicals wear off. And that's about all the time you need for the father to be there and able to make sure that baby survives through its like first, what do you call it? Like most
vulnerable stage.
Yes. And then he goes off, finds a new partner, mom gets stuck with the babe. But I mean, that was basically, I think, why we released all those hormones. So it's not like we've evolved to be able to prolong, and you can prolong. We'll get to that in another podcast, but there's so much more that now goes into a relationship if you want it to be a long-term relationship, because once those chemicals wear off, all of these typical relationship points are not going to keep you happy.
No.
It's when you start to share interests and time together, when you start to have mutual support for growth, emotional intimacy, true companionship, creating a shared life vision, all these things we spoke about on the Enlightened relationship side, that you actually want to be in that relationship. It's fulfilling, it's exciting, there's love there, there's support, there's appreciation, there's all these beautiful things that you need for a relationship to last long term.
So like in the initial stages, when the chemicals are released in your brain and you're going crazy and that person doesn't reply within 5 minutes, everyone's been there. I'm worried, have I done something wrong? Let me message her or him again. And it's like, it's all about dependency. You need that person to fulfill your life. This is my one and only. If they fall off the planet tomorrow, I'm done. And we've all been there. Okay. And like you said, what happens after 3 years now? If you haven't worked on these deeper issues, guess what? Guy goes away, girl goes away, and the relationship's done. Oh no, it's his fault, it's her fault. He did that, she did this.
Never an amicable.
It's never amicable scripting, but because it was so intense in the beginning. It was the love of my life. My Facebook status is we'll be married in 3 weeks. And
it was all based on need and codependency.
Exactly.
So like the shift to an enlightened relationship then becomes one of union. It's not where you need each other, you want each other. It's not where like my life won't be complete, or like I hate that thing where it's like my other half. Like you should not have an other half. You should be whole by yourself. The partner should just completely complement you and like make your life more fun, more interesting, but not be dependent on that person for anything. Because the truth is people die, people move on, people lose interest, whatever it may be. And if you base your whole life around that
half
person,
your life was your other half, and then you've lost half yourself.
Exactly. So when it's union, it's just such a more beautiful relationship to be in, because there's no room for jealousy, there's no room for codependency, there's no room for any of these negative things that come up, because you are in the union, you are together for the betterment of each other.
It's spot on.
Spot on.
Do you think our chemicals are worn off yet?
No.
But we married for 3 years, together 5 or 6.
What do you think, babe?
Well, the chemicals are still flowing through me.
Gotta keep that spot flying, boy. Okay, well, we hope that helped you guys to understand a little bit what the difference between is your typical or your traditional relationship as opposed to an enlightened or conscious relationship. We thought it would just be important to explain it a little before we like dive into heavier topics or deeper topics, because we wanted you guys to have a better understanding of what exactly we're talking about in the first place. So, and
also how a lot of your upbringing can, in your subconscious mind, affect how you are now. And I'm not saying what you've learned from your parents is always wrong, but a lot of the stuff comes from a traditional place where it's either this or that. And maybe that people haven't been awoken to what we're talking about. And yeah, hopefully we can shed some light and you can start seeing the light.
Yes, I think that's such an important topic or point, because we are most like moldable when we are so young, and we spend most of that time with our parents being told what's good and bad, what's right and wrong. Sky's blue, the grass is green. And a lot of people never question that. They just go through their life believing that these things are how it is. And it's such a beautiful journey when you really start to, and that's why I think what was the point where we were talking about having different views, but being interested in each other to learn from each other. That's such an important thing in a relationship, because you learn so much, you expand your mind, you like change your perspective, because people's opinions are exactly that. It's their opinions from their beliefs that they got from their parents, probably got from their parents. And just because they said that's how it is doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it is. So if anything, like, start to put yourself out of your comfort zone, start to look at things from a different perspective, start to ask people why they believe certain things or why they're saying certain things, instead of reacting with anger because it doesn't suit your idea of what is right or wrong. And it'll really be such a beautiful way to open your mind and learn new things, basically.
Just have a much better relationship that way.
And it's not just with your lover, it's with your friend, your family. It's just such a beautiful way to live.
Exactly.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Catch you later.
If you like this episode, let us know on our Instagram account. And if you have any questions, you can pop us a DM too. But until next time, we'll see you soon.
Cheers.